everyone, and welcome back to live coverage of Eternal Weekend. I'm here with Skura, and we have the semifinals ready for you guys. We are going to cover I believe, the Julian Jakubowicz matchup against Mark Tobias. So the two players that have been crushing the tournament. I guess everybody in the top 8 has been having a great weekend so far. Mark is playing the Doomsday combo. We've had him in the feature match a couple times. Julian is playing Rock Delver, a thing of the past, you could say, but he's been doing really well with that deck as well. So let's take a look at the brackets if we have that slide ready, just to show you what the current situation looks like. What are the semifinals matchup? So here we have it: Julian against Mark, Temur Delver against Doomsday. On the other side of the semifinal bracket, we have Simon against Michelle playing Cradle Control and Temur Cascade. So right now we saw a deck we labeled Ragnar Scam. It's not exactly the same thing, from Modern, but Ragnar Scam. We do have Temur Cascade in the semifinals, so this looks a lot like Modern.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, which is a cool way in the sense that maybe you can transition from Legacy to Modern if you wanted to, because you've got your Modern deck, and you can at least try to buy some cards and try this format out, which is absolutely excellent.
Yeah, that's a good call. If you are a Modern player and you were watching our coverage, maybe you're thinking about trying out Legacy for the first time. There are a lot of decks where you just change the mana base a little bit, or you don't even have to get the Legacy dual lands in a deck like Death Shadow. You're using pretty much the same mana base as in Modern, and you can try the format that way. But let's take a look at our first match between Mark and Julian. Doomsday combo against Temur Delver. How do you think this matchup usually goes? What's the dynamic like? What are some of the most key points in the game? Some of the most important cards?
Yeah. So what I like about the Julian's list is that it's pretty aggressive. 4 days for Force of Will, we know. We've got for Lightning Bolt to keep the opponent's life total low. And as we know, Doomsday halves your life total. Now, mind you, you can cast the bolt before the halving of the life total or after, depending how the math works out. You've got the Questing Druid, which is okay, but I would fully expect it to be played on turn 2 as a creature rather than as a card advantage spell. But the sideboard is where it's at, with triple Force of Negation, triple Pyroblast, maybe a Blood Moon, who knows, and a Surgical. He can really put up a fight. But then on the flip side, we've got Mark, who doesn't have a typical list because he doesn't play like an all-in combo. He's got triple the One Ring that we saw and triple the Teferi Time Raveler, which you have also seen. And so he can play this fairish game, especially alongside his triple Veil main deck. So he can go like turn 3, Lotus Petal, Teferi, hold up Veil, and in addition to that, he still has got his usual Daisies and Force of Will. So it could be really, really interesting. But again, Mark is the one who can threaten to win immediately. And indeed, we see Dark Ritual Doomsday in hand. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. No threat turn 1 for Julian.
So what kind of opener is Julian looking for? Does he want the counters? Does he want the card selection spells? Is he looking for an aggressive opener? What's going on through your head if you're Julian sitting down for the match?
So typically when you have an aggressive interactive deck against a combo or ramp deck, you'd like some interaction, you'd like pressure, but if you have just interaction, it usually isn't enough. Just pressure might not get there. A mix of both is what you want. What I would like from Julian is have a lot of pressure and maybe like a single daze to buy him 1 turn and then kill the opponent, rather than a bunch of interaction and just a single threat, because Mark is much better at playing through interaction than playing against pressure. Again, with Veil, with Daze, with Teferi. So as Julian, I'd rather have the proportion, let's say 2-1 when it comes to pressure to interaction.
If you are Mark in this situation, how do you approach the matchup? Is this a match where you look at your opponent's deck list and you think, okay, well, this is not a deck that's going to kill me in the first 3 turns, so I probably have at least 4 turns, maybe more. I'm going to be able to use that Veil of Summer, or am I looking for a super fast, super aggressive hand That's gonna be him looking to go. So here it is. I swear to God, every time we feature Mark, he has some kind of a busted opener. This time he starts with a Dark Ritual into Doomsday on turn one, which could, thanks to cards like Edge of Autumn and Street Wraith, spell Doomsday for Julian if it actually resolves. So Julian fights back with a Force of Will.
Daze
Mark
is
fights
back.
back with a Daze, saying, all right, I would like my card to resolve. Do you have anything else? And looking at Julian's hand, he actually has 2 more forces. This is unbelievable.
Yeah, but bear in mind that Mark spent Dark Ritual and Doomsday to threaten a win, actual win, but Julian spent also 2 cards to thwart it. So worst case for Mark is that we trade 1 for 1. Best case, he wins the game. And then he also traded Days for the force. So on the cards, Mark is up 1. So yeah, I don't hate Mark's position. I think it was really good to make them go for it. So the worst thing that could have happened was some combination of Days, but because it was forces, I think it's decent still, yeah.
Okay, so both players trading some resources here. Julian plays a Brainstorm. I think I saw a couple of Dazes on the top. But what he's looking for now is certainly a threat, so he can start pressuring Mark before he finds another Doomsday.
And I don't think I see pressure. I think I saw, yes, Brainstorm, Fetchland, double Days. Yeah, I think something along these lines. So yeah, it's far from pressure. And so if Julian keeps making land drops and Mark keeps playing land drops, Mark is the one with the One Ring with the Fairy in the deck and the Doomsday.
All right, so Julian resolves the Brainstorm, decides to keep the cards on top, plays a Polluted Delta. So if he wants to, he can shuffle away the cards at the end of turn, depending on what Mark does.
Oh,
Wow, Wasteland. We did mention a few times that Mark is playing a 15 land deck, most of which are actually fetch lands. So he does not have that many actual mana producing lands. I think there are 5 or 6 or 7. So these cards are like Wasteland are very, very effective against him. But keep in mind that he is playing cards like Dark Ritual. He is playing cards like Lotus Petal and Lion Side Diamond, so he can easily operate with just 1 land.
and right after Lawrence revealed, he also has Edge of Autumn to sacrifice. We have seen so many Edge of Autumns in response to Wasteland yesterday and now today. Now, what Julian did was a pretty interesting sequencing. So he kept Wasteland on top, and then if Mark played, for example, maybe a Fetchland or a Basic, maybe he would have shuffled that Fetchland, the Wasteland away. But because Mark played Underground Sea, he kept that on top. So yeah, I really like that thing from Julian. And now here we're dazing a Ponder, Delver on the battlefield, flipping a Daze. This is exactly what we want.
Could you explain here why Julian decided to daze that Ponder? Like that something changed in the game that makes him go, okay, well, I'm gonna start fighting over your card draw now. What is the reasoning behind that?
I think he just doesn't want Mark to get off the ground, right? Because he's scrambling a bit. You know, he had to sacrifice a land, return a land with Daze. He doesn't have anything going on. And no, Julian needs a single Delver to go, while Mark has to actually have multiple pieces to arrange them. Now, Juju has got a Daze in hand, but you cannot Daze through Petal, which Mark had played before. Ponder, knowing there could be another Daze. So basically, it's all in on the Delver because there is just Daze backup. Even something as simple as land, some Teferi bounce could be devastating.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting how the dynamic changes. We talked about generally saving your counters to fight over the Doomsday, but now that you already have a threat in play, you wastelanded the opponent. Like you mentioned, they had to return 1 land back to their hand with Daze, so they are working with lower resources. In that situation, it seems pretty reasonable to just use your Daze to fight over that Ponder to not let your opponent make their land drops and try to get back into the game. So Mark finds himself at 11, casting a Brainstorm. If we have any players that are just getting into Legacy, or somebody who's mostly a modern or a standard player or a limited player that are just joining us, what's the main appeal of the card like Brainstorm in Legacy? Like, how does that that card is probably one of the most, if not the best card in the entire format. Can you tell us why?
Yeah, so basically you get access to 3 fresh cards. So let's assume your hand is, let's say all lands, right? Just blanks. What you can do is draw 3 fresh cards, put 2 lands back, essentially, replenishing your hand with meaningful spells. And then you can shuffle the remaining cards away with fetch lands, Lorien's Revealed, making you, free from redrawing them. So not only have you got more spells in hand, but you're redrawing fresh cards. So yeah, it's just super powerful. You can also hide cards from discard with it. You can set up your Doomsday piles like we've seen, or Doomsday sequencing rather. But yeah, right now Mark is at 7, so he can fetch once. If he fetches once, he's dead in 2 attacks. And if he doesn't fetch, because he goes down to 6 right now, I think, or maybe now it's down to 7.
Yeah, thanks to fetch lands in the format, Brainstorm in a lot of situations effectively feels like casting Ancestral Recall, and Julian is going to be able to use his Ponder in the same way. He cast Ponder, found 2 lands on top, and a Force of Will. So 2 extra lands in this situation, not really what you want, but the Force, that's a card he certainly wants to draw. Thanks to the fetch land, he can now shuffle the 2 lands away. So now it's Mark casting the Ponder, pondering his options.
But as Julian, even though I've got like a 2 or 3 turn clock, I would be scared because it's the 3rd turn that Mark is casting cantrips, and Mark has just so many threatening cards. Julian has got the some protection, but Mark has no Triple Veil main deck. So something like Teferi Veil, Bouncy of Delver, basically resets the game heavily in Mark's favor. He passes back. I think Marx is just treating his life total as a full resource, waiting until the actual last turn, and then doing something meaningful. And yeah, we see the shuffle that you might have mentioned. The best draw would probably be something like Lightning Bolt and insulates you against any removal on Delver. Now, when I say removal, I basically mean Teferi Bounce, because there is no actual removal in the deck. Like, actually 0 copies. So fetch, redraw. Let's see what's there. And it's a brainstorm, so it could be anything. How many cards in hand for Mark? So what he can do is hold on to the brainstorm and be able to Force of Will with the brainstorm and then have Daze on top of that, which gives it double protection, and that might just be good enough. Mark cannot force back because he's dead to the Delver. Really close, but I have no idea what's in Mark's hand. There was a Veil.
One of those cards was a Veil of Summer.
Oh, if there is no land drop. Oh, but there is a Daze back, but it doesn't do anything.
So this is going to be interesting. That Delver is almost lethal next turn. Mark doesn't see into Julian's hand. There could also be a Lightning Bolt, as this is game 1. So Mark might be thinking that, I might very easily be dead next turn. This Teferi, for him, has to resolve. If it resolves, it's going to buy him some extra time. It's also going to make the counter spells useless. So Julian definitely has to fight over that. Let's see what he decides to do.
Yeah, also Mark has seen 3 forces, so he might not be necessarily ready for the 4th one and a Daze, because what's going to happen probably is now a proper counter war, a non-lethal attack from Julian, and then actually Brainstorm in response.
And you might be thinking that, wow, Julian got super lucky. He already found 3 forces, another force in his hand. Well, that's a thing with this Delver deck. That I guess a thing in general in Legacy. If you have cards like Dragon's Ray Channeler, you have Brainstorm, you have Ponders. He's also playing Portend. You have so much card selection that in most games you definitely see way over half of your library, thanks to all the card selection, all the shuffling, all the extra RC triggers. So what looks like Julian getting super lucky. I mean, he certainly did get some good fortune with drawing all the forces. But thanks to all the card selection, it is not uncommon to see 3/4 of your deck throughout one game.
Okay, so he's putting some stuff back. He will force this Teferi. Yeah, thinking through his options, he really wants to sequence everything perfectly there. He doesn't want to walk into anything.
All right, so the Teferi's still on the stack. It cannot really resolve because those counters would get would be useless. So now it's up to Julian to decide what to do. He exiles the days. This is
Days,
interesting.
okay.
Both players do have access
Whoa,
to
whoa.
each other's deck list. So now Mark is ready with the Veil of Summer.
No!
Oh my god.
No!
What is the last card in Julian's hand? Is that a blue card? I believe it was a blue card.
He exiled the days that he otherwise could have used. Oh, this is
Wow.
insane. Now Teferi resolves, no pressure on the battlefield, and 4 life, so Bolt doesn't kill him.
Wow. Everything
Okay.
changed with this Teferi resolving. Now Mark doesn't have to be worried about counter spells. If Julian does have the bolt, he's most likely going to end up bolting the Teferi to make sure his counters are life again. Decides to
Oh my god.
fetch to shuffle away the lands on the top of his deck.
Also, Mark drew from the Teferi, he drew a land drop, so he actually makes a land drop, and he's holding the days. So if Julian actually tries to string a sequence, he might get days at the end of that sequence. So
yeah, Julian was put under a very hard decision. Would you rather keep a Brainstorm that is a super valuable card right now, or a Daze, which would be incredibly impactful if Mark has exactly that one Veil of Summer, but also since he already has 4 lands in play, it could also be useless. Julian decided to go with the Brainstorm.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if you caught a peek of what was on top, but I think it was Force of Will.
Yeah, there's a Portent.
Portent me. Merc. Oh, Murktide Days land. And it's like I think it's the last copy of Days total, or maybe a third copy. Okay, again, very interesting, very intricate.
Yeah, there's
game.
always a lot of people in the chat saying he should have done this, he should have done that. Keep in mind that we have perfect information, right? We see into both players' hands. We know exactly what they're working with. If you are sitting at the table playing the semifinals after 10 rounds yesterday, waking up early again, the situation is a lot harder than it seems.
And also bear in mind, Mark actually has to win from this position. He has to win. So yes, he seems to have stabilized, but he has to win. Now he has at 4 life, so he can Doomsday, go down to 2 and win with protection of Teferi. But if he Doomsdays, go down to 2 and passes, and there are these pass the turn piles, then Julian could bolt him to death. So he has to Doomsday now.
Yeah, the thing is, even if Mark Doomsdays, how many cards does he actually have that would straight up right away draw him a card that are not Street Wraith, right? If he Doomsdays, he's going to have to go to 2 life, at which point Street Wraith is not really a card you want to have in your hand. So now we're getting into a very, very interesting territory.
So he would need to, he would need to have a lot of mana, and he does seem to have plenty of mana. For example, start with Dark Ritual and then play a cantrip like Brainstorm or Ponder. There is also a single copy of Edge of Autumn left. So that's a 0 life, 0 mana way of drawing a card. So there are ways to do it. Fetch land. Well, past the turn, I assume the Delver flips, and it does flip. It can hit Mark down to 1.
Yeah, now Julian has another very interesting decision. Do you hit Mark to 1, or do you try to kill his Teferi?
So yeah, now gets him down to 1.
This is a giant Murktide, so Mark at 1 life, I think he decides it is time to pack it in. There's nothing I can do, even if I cast a Doomsday. That's not really going to help me. That was a very back and forth game. Mark threatening the kill on turn 1, possibly with that turn 1 Doomsday. Julian with all 4 Force of Wills in the first 5 or so turns. Definitely did get a little bit lucky there, but again, as we mentioned, in Legacy, you have so much card selection, all the RC triggers. Delver triggers fetch lands to shuffle your library, that you do see 3/4 of your deck pretty much every game. So he was able to find the right pieces to stop Mark from going off. And now we enter sideboarding. What do you think Julian is most likely going to bring in, and does the matchup change at all after sideboarding? Does the dynamic change? Is there anything you would like to point out?
Yeah, I would certainly like Force of Negation and Pyroblast. I think these are the cards I'm really tempted to bring in, maybe even a Surgical on top of that. Now, he has seen Veils, and he can look at the deck list of the opponent, and there are 4 Veils total, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, and that's in addition to triple Teferi. That's in addition to Forces of Negation that Mark has. So permission might be a difficult avenue to find on, because Mark seems to be really ready for that. I think what Mark wants to do is make sure that he doesn't die too early. So Prismatic Ending will surely come in just to kill that early creature and leave Juliet with just a bunch of counter spells that he will win through at some point. There is this dynamic that you can start the chain with Veil of Summer to make everything else uncounterable later and then win. You might also want some, land heavy hands to just deploy the One Ring, Teferi, and play this kind of aspect control with a combo finish-esque type of game. Yeah, so Mark is thinking of his sideboarding options. I think he's pulling some forces to the front. Yeah, cutting them, it seems. Prismatic Ending indeed brought in. We have also seen Mark bring Shieldreds in these types of matchups. He also shaves on Dark Ritual, cards that don't do anything. Or maybe they're very prone to disruption. Yeah, so he's making some proper adjustments. He's still thinking about these One Rings. Pull them to the front. Yeah, but the ring might be cut because of days in the matchup. Yeah, the ring.
Wow, shaving one bonder as well. Yeah, I guess it's the case of, well, sometimes when I'm not sure what to cut, I'm just gonna cut one of each, and my deck is still gonna work. Yeah, the One Ring, it certainly, that is certainly a card that definitely comes into the consideration. It's a 4-mana card. I'm playing against a Daze deck, against a Force of Will deck, against a Wasteland deck. Another card that we saw Mark board out was Dark Ritual. This is also very interesting because of what happened in the first game. Even if you do have a bunch of Dark Rituals, you might see your spell get countered. So interesting dynamic there. Is this an opening hand, or is Julian looking at his sideboard?
I think he's still sideboarding.
Okay. Yeah, Questing Druid I think is a little too slow for the matchup, so seems reasonable to take that out. He also takes out some of the burn spells, lightning bolts. I think he still keeps 2 lightning bolts in his deck. I think that's mainly because of the fairy. If the fairy ever comes down, but bounces something, he's going to be able to deal with it with the lightning bolt.
Yeah, also when Mark's Doomsdays and loses half the life total, if he was on low life beforehand, you can just bolt him to death.
All right, let's use the little break in sideboarding. Different players are ready to shuffle and present for game 2. We have Ultimate Guard sponsoring the event. Ultimate Guard makes gaming accessories, not just for Magic, but also for other games. Everything you need, from the range of deck boxes, sleeves, binders, all these sidewinders, special boxes for your commander decks, including places where you can put your dice, stuff like that. Make sure you check out their store, ultimateguard.com, and we have a special promotion for you this weekend. With this code on the screen, EternalUG10, you're going to be able to save 10% on your entire purchase. So make sure you check out ultimateguard.com and their products for not just Magic but other card games as well. This code is going to give you a 10% discount. In the meantime, hopefully we are ready with shuffling, with presenting, with the mulligans. Hopefully we're going to be back with game 2 shortly. All right, there it is. Yeah, I'm not sure if this is time walk match, if we are live. We are going to be bringing you the coverage of Vintage as well. So we're going to cover, I think, both semifinal matches. Then we're going to cover a finals match of the Legacy Championship, followed by, I think, round 3 of Vintage and the rest of the Vintage tournament. So there is going to be 4 more Vintage Swiss rounds, and the top 8 followed by, obviously, crowning a Vintage winner as well. Looks like both players are ready to start game 2.
Yeah, and let me just give a shout out to these beautiful hand cams. We can just see very clearly what the opening hand is. So production value, excellent. And we see Underground Sea into Ponder, Swords to Plowshares in hand, ready for that turn 1 threat. So let's see if we're keeping the cards.
Big shout out to Anurag, who is essentially single-handedly producing the entire coverage here, obviously with the help of our sponsors, Cheeky Entertainment and Ultimate Guard. But he is currently in Prague producing the entire show by himself, obviously with us doing the coverage here, Skura on the other side of the microphone.
Okay, so we see Ponder resolved. And Julian, before that first land drop, already thinking through his options. You spoke about it yesterday, right? That sometimes you just have to think what you will do before making that even the smallest play.
Yeah. This is a good lesson. If you are resolving mulligans or when you're looking at your 7-card hand, even if you're going to keep, even if it's the easiest keep in the world, always think about what you're going to do in your first turn, so you don't give away what you have. If you're going to play your Volcanic Island and then half tap it, and then start thinking for 30 seconds, that conveys a lot of information to the opponent.
Yes.
When you're keeping your hand, try to think about how your first and second turn are going to look like, so you don't give away information to the opponent for free.
And so now we're tanking on the Surveil trigger. We're unsure what he's thinking about, but we'll see soon enough, either in the graveyard or on the top of the deck. But we see that turn 1 threat resolved. We know it's going to get swords through days, potentially, because there will be Underground Seas up. Okay, so Ponder was the card he was pondering over. Look at the top card of the deck. Pass, draw. And fetch, I assume, Tundra. Yeah, Tundra swords it. Because I think the longer the game goes, generally speaking, Mark is going to get favored. Because of the raw quality of cards between the One Ring, Teferi, the combo killing, combo threatening Doomsday. Although I've heard from a lot of Delver players that they are okay with this matchup because they've got the pressure backed up by disruption.
Yeah, I mean, what we saw in game 1 was that it takes 4 Force of Wills and 4 Dazes to beat Doomsday, right? I guess it could be a little bit different after sideboard when you also have access to cards like Pyroblast. But game 1, it certainly took a lot from Julian to be able to stop Mark.
Another sequence. So we play Wasteland. We play Delver first, holding up Wasteland for a potential day's payment, and once it resolves, then we Wasteland. And it wasn't a Chandra, it was a Scrubland, so a black-white jewel. I took a peek at Julian's hand, and it's stacked beyond imagination. It's Force of Negation, Force of Will, double Pyroblast. And he had just wasted his opponent, and Delver is already on the battlefield.
Now Mark is casting a Brainstorm, and Julian giving it a thought. Is he going to daze back? He is stopping the Brainstorm. So similar thing to what happened in game 1. Julian does have a creature in play. He just used the Wasteland, and now he wants to fight over the card selection spells. But given that Mark immediately played a Tropical Island, and not with that look of, oh, wow, I guess I should have played it before casting my spell, but more of a look of, I baited you into countering my Brainstorm because I have enough lands in my hand anyway. Now cast a Dark Ritual. Is this something, do you think, worth fighting over, or would you rather let Mark cast a Doomsday here and then try to fight over that?
This is super tricky for a few reasons. So first of all, it gives you mana for a potential daze in general, but Julian knows if he has daze or not. it could be a bait spell even from Mark. He's just ritualing and playing the One Ring. So he might have Veil up there. Veil cannot get Pyroblasted. The One Ring cannot get Pyroblasted. But there is double force, but I'm not sure if there is enough blue cards. So he can Force of Will it. Yeah, so he brainstorms in response and he tries to hit multiple blue cards, which he does.
Wow.
Because he needed to use Brainstorm and find double blue in the top 3, and he did.
Wow, yeah, his hand is super stacked right now.
Wow. And he even find Wasteland for his trouble. So he can Wasteland that Underground Sea after he's done with the sequence. This is unreal.
Yeah, this is often what the Delver decks come down to. You put one threat into play, and then you use your card selection pieces to find all the counter spells. You fight over your opponent's mana. You deny them some mana development. You deny them the card selection pieces. Use your brainstorms to find the Dazes, Force of Will, Force of Negations, all the while when attacking with your one Delver of Secrets and using all the counter spells and Wastelands to set the opponent back.
And now he's holding Pyroblast plus Force, attack you for 3 again, pass the turn. Mark draws, and this is exactly what I talked about. So the main thing that's most important is the threat. Okay, Teferi. He says nope. Oh, he even wasted 2 cards on it.
Wow, yeah, he had to use the Lotus Petal there to get white mana because Julian used that Wasteland earlier to destroy the Scrubland. So Mark has to 2-for-1 himself. Doesn't work out. 1 mana counter takes care of the Teferi. Delver keeps attacking, and Julian starts playing faster and faster.
Wow! Portent you to stack your deck in a way that that doesn't really help you that much. Oh my god. Yeah, pass the turn, draw a card, he draws a blank. Passes back. Bash you for 3. Down to 1 life, cannot fetch anymore. Draw.
Wow.
Yeah, this game is over.
Congratulations to Julian, who is able to write that 1 Delver to victory again, using all the counter spells, Force of Wills, Force of Negations, Pyroblast, the Dazes, Wastelands to press the advantage. A great tournament for Mark. I think he showed us that he is very, very proficient with these combo decks. He always knows what he's doing. He always is very well prepared. He's very well practiced with them. But Julian seemed to have all the answers, and drawing the 4 Force of Wills in game 1 with the 4 Dazes on top of that was just exactly what he needed to get the W there.
Yeah, that was insane. That was absolutely insane what happened. Like, Mark couldn't really get off the ground, like, in any capacity. He had nothing going on for him. The only thing he actually resolved and mattered was Swords to Plowshares. But after that, it was just downhill from there. And so, yeah.
Yeah, I think he needed to 2-for-1 himself a few too many times in that game. Casting a Dark Ritual to cast a Doomsday, getting that countered, followed by having to crack that Lotus Petal to cast that Teferi. That got Pyroblasted. So after sideboard, Julian was definitely ready with the right counters, and Mark's draw just didn't really work out. I believe we are ready to go right away into semifinal match number 2 without any breaks. So let's take a look at the decks here. We have a deck that you typically see in Modern, one of the most played Modern decks, Temur Cascade or Temur Rhinos, whatever you prefer. I think we saw this match earlier, or this deck earlier in action. I'm not sure if it was a different player, but we saw a match where the Temur Cascade player was on the draw. And then said, hold on, when his opponent went to play their land number 1 and said, in your upkeep of your first turn, I'm going to exile a Simian Spirit Guide and double Elvish Spirit Guide, and still in your upkeep, I'm going to cast a Violent Outburst before you even get to play your first land, so you can't daze me. Let's see if something like that is going to happen here again, but this is a pretty typical Crashing Footfalls deck with a bunch of Cascade spells. Anything you see here, Philip, that you think is out of the ordinary?
So we see main deck Mystical Dispute here, which we hadn't seen before in other lists. Double basic, so no basic mountain, quadruple wasteland, very packed sideboard as well with Fury, Endurance, Force of Vigor. We've got Inevitable Betrayal, which is an interesting tech. That's basically a bribery that you can cascade into. You can steal the opponent's Atraxa or Grizzlebrand, maybe. And Minsc and Boo, another way to play a more fairer game. Now, this player has not maxed out on the spirit effects because he's got 7 instead of 8.
One question I have for you is, what is the logic behind 4 Wastelands in a deck that is racing to get to 3 mana to play the Cascade cards? Obviously, you do have the pitch cards to get extra mana, the Spirit Guides, but what is the logic behind 4 Wastelands in a deck like this?
Yeah, so the main thing is that you really don't want your opponent to be able to come back. So you might use Wasteland basically as a spell post your Cascade. Because remember, Wasteland still adds mana, right? So you can play Wasteland as one of the lands, use Trop plus Forest, play Shardless, and then cash it in after the first Cascade, which should be enough most of the time anyways.
Okay, so you're typically looking to not wasteland the opponent right away when they have a Delver, but you're typically looking to play the Cascade spell first, using your pitch cards, using the colorless mana if you need to cast the Cascade spell, get the Rhinos in play, and then start pressing the advantage. All right, let's take a look at deck number 2, which is the Cradle Control, played by... I guess I'll get that name ready in a little bit, because MTG Melee unfortunately doesn't give us exactly the right names all the time. But Cradle Control, what can you tell us about this deck?
Yeah, evolution of elves. It's still a natural order deck that wants to cheat something into play. It could be Crater, it could be Behemoth, it could be Atraxa. Now, crucially, both Behemoth and Atraxa can be stolen by Inevitable Betrayal. And I'm very interested in whether Cascade sides into this alternative plan, which just could happen. And we've got Orcish Bowmasters creating bodies, which makes it much easier for Crater Hoof to be lethal. You can find Grist from Natural Order, Grist Sun Zenith. You've got some small land package with the Lair of the Hydra, Bojuka Bog, and Cradle that you can find with Elvish Reclaimer. So yeah, there's a lot happening here. The thing I would be looking out for is whether the Cascade deck changes the Cascade payoff into Inevitable Betrayal.
All right, we'll find out. Let's start with game number 1 of the semifinal match between Michelle and Simon. Looking at these 2 decks, Temur Cascade and Cradle Control, how do you think this matchup usually goes? Who would you say is a favorite in the match? All right, looks like we have some technical issues. Actually, we're gonna take a little bit of a break to maybe reset the stream. Make sure things work out. We're gonna be right back to fix the technical issue, and then we can start with the semifinals. All right, welcome back. Sorry for the little bit of a delay. We had some technical difficulties. We had to, I think, restart the stream. So if you are not seeing us, you can just press F5. That should refresh your browser, and the stream should be back on. So this is the semifinal match number 2. We already talked about the decks. We talked about the matchups a little bit as well. Not sure what exactly did we cut off, but very quickly, which deck do you think is favored in the matchup, Philip?
Yeah, I think it's really difficult to say. Both are very specific. We don't see that matchup that often. However, I think everything hedges on what the Cascade payoff is, whether it's Inevitable Betrayal or the Rhinos. Because if it is Rhinos, the main way for Simon to get rid of it isn't really in combat per se, because it's the creatures are much smaller. He'd have to go for the actual natural order for a big payoff, right? And then the onus is on the other side, whether there is Force of Will or Force of Negation to stop that. So I think everything will revolve around 2 things, to summarize: the Cascade payoff, and then the natural order on the other side of the table.
All right, if you had to pick one player to win, who would you pick?
I would certainly pick the Temur Delver player.
Okay.
Juju Bean, known Twitter user, let's say. He's been on fire, and this would be my favorite.
All right, so the top 8, the way it works is that the higher the person who finished higher in the Swiss standings gets the choice of playing first. So Simon will be on the play. I think he does have a Greens and Zenith there. Looking at Michelle's hand, it was only one land, I believe, and a Cascade card, but not enough mana sources. Decides to send it back.
There were two Lorien's reveals, but the issue is that every Lorien is kind of like a tapland. So he clearly has come to the conclusion that he cannot waste so much time just fumbling around trying to find lands. Especially as the potential alternative 6-card hand could be much more busted, right? You can have Cascade, a couple of lands and a Spirit Guide effect, and then you're off to the races.
All right, so Michelle finishing his mulligan, looking for something like a Cascade card, land, some of the Spirit Guides. Anything else you're particularly looking for in your opening hand of the Temur deck? Like Fire Ice sounds like it would be a very good card. You can try to deal with their Tried Arbor, some of the elves. How big is Force of Negation in a matchup like this? Do you need it early? Do you need it at some point during the game, but it doesn't have to be in your opener? Is that a card you're aggressively mulliganing for?
So I don't think I would be actively mulligan for it, but I really want a single copy to stop that natural order from finding Atraxa, because when you actually have to fight head on, Atraxa is super difficult to fight through because it's 7/7 lifelinker. You've got some ways. For example, you can petty theft it, you can tap it with Fire Ice, so you're not dead in the water, but you'd certainly rather that not happen. Also, Crater Hoof might just kill you.
All right, looks like the match finally started. Simon, turn one, Dryad Arbor off of a Green Sun Zenith. We had a discussion yesterday. You can let us know what you think in the chat. Do you think Green Sun Zenith would be safe to unban in Modern? It sounds like a very fair card. Like when you look at the ban list, a lot of the cards either enable some crazy combo decks or, they do something super crazy. Would Green Sun Zenith would be too wild? Like, would this be too much of a thing? Always get a Dryad Arbor on turn one or something like a Primeval Titan later on. Would that be too unfair?
Yeah, I personally, I'm in the camp that we can try it out and see what this experiment yields. But I mean, in general, I am much more of an unban guy than ban, because you can shake up the meta in different ways. You don't need to ban the most popular deck or some obnoxious cards. You can just put more choice into the format, give people space to play around with them, and maybe shake up the format this way.
Someone pointing out in the chat a great solution: just ban Dryad Arbor, especially the one with that awkward art that makes it look like a regular forest, so you don't often actually realize you're attacking into a 1/1. That would be a very fun solution. Here, I think Michelle is sitting on a handful of blue cards. I didn't see any fast mana. I didn't see any of the bitch cards that would give him a faster Cascade card. I also didn't see a Cascade card. I think he does have access to a couple of Force of Wills. I think there was a Brazen Borrower. And in the meantime, Simon is able to deploy the Elvish Reclaimer.
Elvish Reclaimer is a great tool in the deck. We saw it beyond the blocking duty earlier in the day yesterday. And now 2 mana, Fiend Artisan. Now, if there is Fire Ice, okay, there isn't. If there was Fire Ice, you can just untap, kill Dryad Arbor, Fiend Artisan, and be really happy about it. But in this particular case, we're force of willing it.
Yeah, Fire Ice honestly looks like one of Michelle's best cards for the matchup. 4 Fire and Ice seems strange for Legacy. In Modern, I get it. Especially against the fairy decks, you want to be able to turn 2, tap down their land before they can cast the fairy, then use your 3rd land next turn, cast your Cascade card. If the fairy ever comes into play, that's a pretty big deal against the Cascade deck. In Legacy, what do you typically do with Fire and Ice? Why do you think it's such a why do you think it's a card that shows up as a 4/0 in these Cascade decks?
Yeah, so basically the thing is that you cannot really play cheaper cards because of the Cascade restriction. So you want to play something. And there is a very limited pool of cards that fits that description. These are the adventure cards, the split cards, And Fire Ice is just one of them. You can always ice your opponent's land, for example, on the upkeep or at the end step to tap them down. Essentially, maybe time walking them sometimes. So, but yeah, it's mainly because of the Cascade restriction. And so now we've got double Forest, Dryad Arbor for Simon. And okay, a Reclaimer that had been bounced. A second Dryad Arbor. Pass the turn. Wasteland is the draw. Oh, he had drawn Shardless in the meantime. Okay.
So Shardless Agent, Cascade into presumably Crashing Footfalls, make 2 4/4s, present a 2-turn clock if you do not intervene or if you do not block.
In response, once upon a time.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Simon decided to play another Dryad Arbor and not attack with the first one against a player that doesn't have any creatures in play and where you typically do not need your mana to be open in your mono green deck. At the end of turn, though, Simon decides to cast Once Upon a Time, which was the reason to leave it untapped. I guess one of the other things about Fire and Ice is you can pitch it to Force of Will, right? So it just does so many things. It kills an early DRC. It kills an early Delver of Secrets. It's really good against these Elves decks. It can help you tap down their mana to force your spells through, and you can also pitch it to Force of Will.
And right now, what Simon really wants to play is that Natural Order. I don't think he has it, and there would be any answer on the other side of the table anyways.
So Simon fires back with another copy of Fiend Artisan. Didn't really get to do a whole lot this game so far. Michelle attacks for 8. Plays a Wasteland, passes the turn. So he does have the option available to him of cracking the Wasteland to deal with one of the Dryad Arbors. Decides whether he wants to do that or not. At the end of turn, Simon sacrifices one of the lands into the Elvish Reclaimer. And this was an interesting situation because if Simon wants to do it, that leaves the option open for Michelle to crack the Wasteland now to deal with the Dryad Arbor. If you just pass, then if they use the Wasteland themselves first, then you have to activate then you can activate the Reclaimer, sacrifice the Dryad Arbor that is being targeted with the Wasteland, and you can get a land out of it that way.
Yeah, that's a good catch. And okay, Simon's considering his options, but finally goes for Cradle that immediately gets destroyed.
Michelle wasted no time saying, okay, well, I'm not going to let you untap and get 4 extra mana from this land, so let's put that one into the graveyard. You can finish shuffling your deck, and let's see what you can do. So what cards are Simon looking for? What cards is Simon looking for right now? Is that limited to 3 mana only? Is he looking for something like a Natural Order to try to get that Behemoth? Is there something else he can do? Get a Troxa into play. How big of a deal is the Troxa for this Temur Cascade deck?
Yeah, so I think it's huge because it's a 7/7 creature that you cannot really win with combat against, and it has lifelink. But then on the flip side, you can ice tap it or petty theft it away. So you've got options to deal with it. Actually, multiple, I would say. But if you don't have it immediately, it might be pretty difficult to deal with because if it hits you once, for example, getting 7 or 14 life on the backswing, then it gives Simon so much time, so many new cards from that Atraxa that it's very difficult to come back from. And we know that Michelle's hand is Volk plus an unknown. So this unknown for Michelle, it would be great if that was Force of Negation. If it's nothing, he'll probably flash and Brazen Borrower end step and smash for 13.
This Temur Cascade deck seems so fair to me, compared to what you can do in the format. Some of the crazy things, some of the turn 1 wins. Just the idea of playing 3 mana Cascade cards to put 2 4/4s into play. If Mark Tobias resolves a 3 mana card, he's casting a Doomsday, he usually wins on the spot. So it is interesting that when you think of Legacy, when you think of these Eternal formats, you're usually thinking, wow, okay, well, these are the formats where people win on turn 1, they win on turn 2, crazy things happen. Well, it turns out that you can take basically what is a modern deck, add a few cards, add the forces, and you have yourself a deck that can make the top 4 of a 700-person tournament.
Okay, so now we see Green Sun Zenith into Quirion Ranger. Quirion Ranger activates the ability, untaps one of the arbors, returns a land to hand. So it seems like a very fair matchup all around. So because the Cascade payoff, as you said, doesn't sound very unfair, and then the Cradle, until it plays actual natural order, it really looks fair as well.
To be fair, talking about fair decks, Simon's deck also looking very fair in this game now that his Gaia's Cradle got destroyed. Limited to just a couple of 1/1s in play and Elvish Reclaimer, but outside of that, he hasn't been able to do anything too crazy so far. There's a flashed in Brazen Borrower at the end of turn, enabling what might be a lethal attack, and Michelle realizing that the 2 Rhinos and the Borrower add up to 11. So perhaps it is also time for me to attack with the Shardless Agent and make that into a more interesting of an attack.
Okay, smash in. Endurance.
Oh, wow, an Endurance.
Thinking if he even wants to bottom the cards, he says, nah, it's okay.
Yeah, Simon saying, how relevant is your graveyard here? Is there anything in your deck? No, not really. Remember, both players are working with perfect information as far as deck lists go. This was a close deck list tournament, but in the top 8, they do have their opponent's full list, so they know their main deck and their sideboard. But here, a 3/4 reach creature is pretty good because it gets to block the Brazen Borrower potentially. Another option Simon has available to him is a double block, where Endurance and a creature would team up on one of the 4/4 Rhinos. In the end, he decides to eat the Borrower and double block the Rhino with the Reclaimer that was already a 3/4. So in the end, Simon takes 4, goes down to 7, and I think the board starts looking very, very even right now.
Yeah, Fiend Artisan grows every turn as well.
Yeah, the difference being that there is an active Fiend Artisan now.
So we don't have much mana available. So if we had a Cradle, the namesake, it would change the math a lot because Cradle would add 5 mana right now. Okay, that's a mana dork, which would be free if there was a Cradle, or essentially free. Now we float mana, untap, bounce land, replay land. So if you would otherwise miss a land drop, you can reuse it with Quirion Ranger, gaining 2 mana in the process, thanks to the untap. So we've got 3. And now we sacrifice Dryad Arbor for an X, which seems to be 2 by the hand gestures.
All right, what is Simon going to get here? Decides to go for another Fiend Artisan. So right now, a very something that's very not typical for Legacy. We're just getting creatures into play that are outclassing each other. I guess it could be typical for a matchup like Delver, where you have Delver Secrets and Dragon's Chandler eventually being outclassed by Murktide Regent. But this is a green on green combat with 4/4s and 5/5s actually attacking into each other. So it looks like Simon is slowly able to stabilize, but we know that at any point, Michelle can just cast an end of turn, violent outburst, get more creatures into play. Oh, wow. Okay, so Lorien Reveal being cast for 5 mana. We mentioned multiple times yesterday how insane of a card Lorien Revealed has been for Legacy. There are 4 main uses, but I guess that doesn't matter as Michelle just decides to scoop it up.
Yeah. He may have just drawn a lot of blanks and, these Fiend Artisan grow out of range. They can just take these Rhinos head on and, yeah.
All right, well, looks like Simon just presented too many creatures in play. Perhaps not enough mana. Maybe showed a Craterhoof Behemoth or Natural Order somewhere in there. Michelle just drew a few too many lands there. The first Cascade spell was not enough, as Michelle was able, or Simon was able to find creatures that were simply bigger than the 4/4. So very, very interesting ending, very weird ending as far as Legacy goes to the match, where the bigger creatures just ended up winning. But that makes it 1-0 for Simon. I think we're ready straight up with game number 2. Remember that we have pre-recorded content for you. We're about an hour ahead of the actual tournament, so we don't have to waste any time looking at players shuffling their deck, sideboarding, and all that usual stuff. So right away, Michelle starts with that suspended Crashing Footfalls. This is a play that I'd like against in attrition-based matchups against decks like Rakdos Scam in Modern, for example, where the game is typically going to go a little bit longer. How do you feel about that here in this matchup in Legacy?
Yeah, so because of the Cascade restriction, you cannot play cards like Ponder or Preordain, which is one of the reasons why, it's really difficult to eschew these very powerful cantrips, but you cannot really put Crushing Footfalls back into the deck. So once you draw it, you kind of have to suspend it because you don't have a use for it otherwise. There is no like Jace the Mind Sculptor to put it back. So the moment you draw Crushing Footfalls, if that ought to happen to you, may it be turn 1, so you can immediately suspend it. Also, it allows you to play a very interactive game because you don't need more Cascaders, so you can just go, for example, here, Fire Ice. If there's Fire Ice end step and he plays like a control game, oh my god, and yep.
Wow. Fire and Ice being the absolutely brutal turn 2 play for Michelle here, basically destroying Simon's entire board. Wow.
Okay, this is vicious.
I mean, this is as good as Fire is gonna get in Legacy, right? Like, there is not a lot of other matchups where you would be able to just use it on turn 2 to kill 2 creatures.
Yeah, and you sign up for a Legacy tournament and you get blown out by Fire Ice. It has to feel pretty bad. And we respond with Owat, also known as Once Upon a Time.
Yeah, remember when that card was legal in Standard alongside with Oko, Gilded Goose?
Wicked Wolf, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, good times, good times. I'm sure people in the chat will let us know how much they enjoyed playing with those cards when they were legal in Standard. Grist is the card taken from Once Upon a Time for Simon there. But yeah, Michelle says, "Oh, by the way, your creatures are still dead. Can you please put them in the graveyard?" Okay. Yeah, so this is a great start for Michelle. We were saying that perhaps turn 1 suspended Crushing Footfalls that might just not be fast enough. In a lot of situations, if Simon was goldfishing, then he would certainly be able to outrace that with playing a bunch of creatures into Craterhoof Behemoth. But now Michelle using that fire to destroy Simon's board, and that Crashing Footfalls is slowly ticking. Exactly what you want to do if you have ways to disrupt your opponent.
Yeah, now it really does look like a modern matchup where you go, okay, Fire Ice your creature, then play Cascade. The opponent says, okay, I guess I'll play Grist. Yeah, so it really looks modern-y from our point of view. Okay, thinking about his options, looking into the sky, Grist on the stack, Force of Will, very aggressive Force of Will. Will we see also Outburst end step? Because that would be...
That was an incredibly fast Force of Will, yeah. If you do have the Outburst here, do you actually force, or do you use the creatures to attack the Grist?
Oh, it's Endurance. Yeah, so with Endurance in hand, it's a bit trickier. but you could still play Endurance, Petty Theft the token, and then attack in. So I'm not sure I would have forced there. But there are multiple options, right? Because now you can actually go for the life total. You don't have to tie up your mana. Wow. And then we cast it in combat to get the buff trigger because why not, right?
That also does not happen very often. Violent Outburst is used for many things, but almost all of them happen to be getting the Cascade card and sort of cheating it into play that way. Using Violent Outburst to actually give your creatures +1/+0. I'm not sure what was the last time I saw that happen, but since Michelle realizes this is a matchup where you are playing green, your deck is playing at sorcery speed, you're going to be adding creatures to the board. There's no need for me to use the Violent Outburst at the end of your turn. Just because the card says instant, I don't have to play it at the end of your turn. So I'm going to use it here for the extra damage, put you to 14, and this way I'm presenting 11 damage next turn with the extra 2 rhinos. It's going to be pretty hard for Simon to get out of this position.
Yeah, now he finds a 1-drop, which is Quarian Ranger. That's far from satisfactory. Now staring at 3/4 plus 4, 11 damage coming through. And out of which 8 is trampling. I mean, a natural order into Atraxa might still be okay because you block one of the creatures. So I wouldn't count Simon out. Okay, pass. Play more rhinos. Okay, we're approaching a situation where Atraxa slowly might not be enough because you can Alpha Strike maybe over that 7 lifelink because you're attacking for now 11. If 11 comes through, you're down to 3. If Atraxa comes down, she blocks 1 and essentially gets you up to 10, which on this board I don't think would be enough.
Yeah, and remember those rhinos, they have trample, so these 1/1 or 0/1 creatures not the best blockers for this type of situation. Simon down to 2. Michelle passes the turn. Is there anything in Simon's deck that can get him out of this situation? Thinks and scoops him up. All right, so 1-1. Michelle equalizes. We're going to be going to game 3 of this Temur against Cradle Control matchup.
It seems like the plan is pretty simple. Either the Cascade deck can trample over whatever is on the board, or Simon can flood it with very big fiend artisans, or a proper natural order, which we still haven't seen so far.
Anything that changes in sideboarding or in the matchup based on whether you are on the play or draw? Like we saw in this matchup that Michelle being on the play, that makes Fire Ice an incredible card. You're going to be able to use that on turn 2 at the end of your opponent's turn to destroy 2 of their creatures. Does that change? Does that dynamic change? Is there anything you might want to change in your deck based on being on the play or draw?
So maybe I'd be happier to see the pitch cards in my deck, my opener, because you can actually alleviate the fact that you're on the draw by playing your spells faster. But other than that, I don't think there are many issues. Maybe you can trim on Fire Ice for the reasons you've mentioned. However, I'm actually still surprised there is no inevitable betrayal, because the longer I'm thinking about it, the longer I like it, because not only would you get the opponent's Atraxa, let's say, but the opponent wouldn't have an Atraxa to find, right? So you're killing basically 2 birds with 1 stone.
Any chance you are ever considering bringing in something like a Mystical Dispute, knowing that the best card in your opponent's deck is likely Natural Order, or do you think that your counters in the main deck are going to be good enough? The Force of Will, possibly the Force of Negations.
I think I would stick with Force of Will and Force of Negation. Mystical Dispute would be just a bit too much. But Fury certainly is a house in this matchup. So Fury plus Inevitable Betrayal, I think, could come in. Now, there could be some tricky situations with Endurance, because Fiend Artisan looks at the number of creature cards in the graveyard. So if you Endurance the opponent, it makes Fiend Artisan smaller, which opens up the trampling to be a bit more successful. We see a Mox which, if I
Wow.
remember correctly, it's literally a one-off in the deck. Wasteland, Respawned, Orcish Bowmasters.
Wait, what is this? How did we go from go from Temur Cascade playing against sort of an elves deck into a turn one Orcish Bowmasters against a Wasteland off of a Chromox. Chromox pitching a black card even to enable the Bowmasters and a Thoughtseize. How many cards does Simon have left in his hand right now? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So Simon's down to 3 cards, and he has 1 mana source and 2 1/1s in play right now. Michelle was very aggressive with that Wasteland. That surprises me, given that he does have the 3 mana Cascade card that he wants to obviously play as fast as possible. I see 1 Outburst, 1 Agent, and a Brazen Borrower there. So the perfect hand against Thoughtseize, you have 2 of your Cascade cards, so a redundant piece. Even if your opponent takes one of them, you're going to be able to still Cascade on turn 3. Now, Simon has an interesting decision. Do you take the Brazen Borrower just because it can do something, earlier than turn 3, or do you take one of the Cascade cards and perhaps hope to draw another Thoughtseize, or maybe try to outclass the 2 Rhinos?
And Orcish Bowmasters, Gasparini is on a blue deck, but Bowmasters doesn't really shine because there are no Brainstorms, Ponders, Preordains, Portents, like we have discussed in other matchups. So it might just be 2 mana, 2 bodies, 2 power total, that's it. Which could be underwhelming, but it still fuels your Gaia's Cradle. You can still sacrifice the army token to your Fiend Artisan. So
Exactly. Yeah, this is a deck that's probably very hard to sideboard with, because even if the Bowmasters are not at their best in a matchup like this, as you mentioned, with Gaia's Cradle, that's one of the best that puts one of your best cards, and you can even cast it at instant speed. It's also a card that trades 1 for 1 against Fire and Ice, which otherwise your deck typically gets 2 for 1 by that easily.
Yeah, that's a good point as well. Yeah. Now, we know that a turn 3 Cascade is coming. We know that there is a Petty Theft effect. You could Petty Theft the Mox if you wanted to. Let's see what Simon can master here.
Yeah, Petty Theft on the Mox actually seems like a very reasonable play. You could also Petty Theft the token there to get some actual value from your Brazen Borrower. Trying to set the opponent back by bouncing the Mox is also reasonable.
But he has drawn a Force of Will. So he's probably holding on to the Petty Theft to have a pitch card. Whoa!
This was the fastest Force of Will I've seen in a really long time. Wow.
Blink and you'll miss it. I'm actually surprised that he went so aggressive into that Force of Will.
Yeah, looks like Michelle was just ready to force anything that Simon was going to play. And this is not a match that we decided to speed up. This is just normal 1x gameplay. The speed of this match is very, very normal. There was not a 15-second pause or anything like that. Michelle just decided to fire off the Force right away. Simon untaps. And is there anything he can use to punish Michelle for using his counter there on the 3/4?
Yeah, I think the biggest punish is just a land. Oh, okay, wait. Actually, no. Because I was going to say land natural order, but let me just double check the wording on natural order. You have to sacrifice a green creature.
A green creature, yes.
Yeah, which Simon doesn't even have. So I guess there wasn't really much that could have punished him. What's interesting nowadays as well, and I think it warrants a mention, green decks are so much more flashy, and by this I literally mean flashy gameplay. Orcish Bowmasters, Endurance, Chord of Calling. Like, you actually can pass the turn and still add to the battlefield. Whereas normally now you would think of green decks as just tap out, pass, tap out, pass. Okay, so thinking about the options, looks into the camera, takes his sweet coverage time, pass the turn. Oh, thinking. Okay. Do the thing that we both knew would happen.
Yeah, there it is. End of turn. Violent Outburst, cascading into a Crashing Footfalls. That gives Michelle 2 4/4 tokens. And now he's going to be able to start racing back if he so chooses. Well, another Outburst.
Oh
So
my God.
now there's some math to be done. Attacking for 8. If Michelle decides to cast a Violent Outburst right away, what would happen? Wow, this is even more important now, having the Outburst and actually giving the +1/+0, because now this is a block of a 3/4 and a
Wow.
1/1.
Wow.
This is going to let Michelle trade the Rhino for both of the creatures, and in the process add 2 more Rhinos onto his battlefield. So if my math is correct, this takes Simon down to 12, and then Michelle presents a lethal attack next turn against what is a lonely Orcish Bowmasters in play. As you mentioned, not a green creature, so Natural Order, very
He's not a top deck, yeah.
likely not a card that Simon can cast next turn. If he has a Dried Arbor, then that would be summoning 6, so that wouldn't give him a green mana right away. So bearing some unforeseen things happening next turn, Simon is in a lot of trouble.
Yeah, very much. Very much. I really like the Cascade position. Now, there are no more Rhinos in the entire deck, if I'm counting correctly. So this is the last, the last front of offense. It's a pretty big front of offense, but if there was a way to deal with it, there might not be a follow-up at all. Fiend
Wow.
Artisan, pretty big, I think. Oh, Cradle? Okay.
Wow, okay.
You can sacrifice Bowmaster, get rid of one of the Rhinos. The other Fiend stays back. Oh, I think it's decent.
Wow, what a turn for Simon. How big is that? How big is that Fiend Artisan? There are 2 Endurances in the graveyard. There's a bunch of lands. I see a once at a time and a lot of lands. Thoughtseize. I think it's actually just a 3/3. 4/4 now that the Bowmaster. So the Grist not only allows him to trade the Bowmasters for that Rhino, but also by putting an extra creature into the graveyard, I think now
Wow! Oh my
Whoa.
God. This is another hard cast. So let me add it to the count, the official count of Lorien revealed hardcast. Okay, we block here. We kill Grist. There might be some rule questions. For example, it stays alive because of state-based actions, because Grist hits the graveyard and is a creature.
Yeah, definitely good to check with the judges, make sure that you resolve that correctly.
And if that were the case, that would be huge.
Yeah, I know. Like, I remember with Death Shadow, right? With Death Shadow, if Death Shadow is a 3/3, your opponent is attacking you with 2 different creatures. One of them is a 3/3, and you block that, but you're also taking damage in the process. There is some funny business going on with exactly, does the Death Shadow grow in time before it gets killed by the other creature? And yeah, it's always definitely good to ask the judges there. Turns out the end result of this combat is a Rhino standing in play with Simon at 11, Michelle at 10, Grist and the Artisan both hitting the graveyard.
Now Artisan is big enough.
Yeah, but Simon draws a Green Sun Zenith, gets another Artisan, this time a 5/5 into play.
Oh, and the hand is full of blanks.
Wow.
Oh, will we see? Yes, we do. Hardcast that Simon Spirit Guide. I think Simon might have turned things around. This is unreal. Oh my God.
So now an actual Grey Ogre is being played. Michelle passes the turn after wastelanding that Gaia's Cradle. What a match so far.
Oh, I love this so much.
Okay, so how can you read into this play? Simon making the attack here, does that mean he has another creature? Like, are you likely to double block that? How big is the Fiend? It's a 6/6, right? He can go for a double block, try to trade that.
Snuff out. Wow, what a draw.
Yeah, that's definitely a suspicious attack there. Oh my god, but Michelle follows up by drawing another Cascade card, this time the Shardless Agent.
I don't think there is any. I'm not sure if I counted. There's either 0 or 1 in the entire deck now.
Yeah, I think there's one more. I think it was the second game where Footfalls was suspended on turn 1. In this game, we only cascaded into 2, so this is the third copy, I believe. 2 more Rhinos, and luckily for Simon, he's at 7, not at 6, so this would not be a lethal attack just yet.
Yeah, but I think he really planned on winning this game by attacking in, because the Cascade deck would have no blockers, but now it does very much have 10 power on the battlefield. So a single turn after turn, we get turned around.
Both players drawing high impactful card after high impactful card off of the top of their library. How big is that Fiend Artisan? I think it's a 6/6, right? It was a 4/4 when it traded, and after that we got another Fiend Artisan, and I think one more creature in the graveyards. I believe it is roughly a 6/6 now, so it can definitely profitably block. But if Simon draws 2 lands in a row, that would still not be enough.
Yeah, this is really exciting. I did not. So the first 2 games were relatively flat in how they went because the one player dominated and the other dominated. But this one is just full of surprises. Box of chocolates, isn't it? Okay, play Verdant Catacombs and pass back. Okay, I saw a face expression on the left side there, which did not suggest anything positive. Yeah, I think it's double land in hand. So if you attack with both, you get Simon down to 1.
Yeah, so now both players know each other's deck list, so Michelle has to take into account what can you have, right? Even if there is a snuff out that would kill one of the Rhinos. One of them was already played, though. Even if there is something like a snuff out, that would kill one of the Rhinos, block another one, go down to go to the 4. Fetchland can obviously always give you a Dried Arbor. That's something that changes the math as well. The Dried Arbor, not a great blocker for the Trampling Rhino, but it can jump in front of the Shardless Agent here. Then the Fiend Artisan would be able to eat one of the Rhinos, and that would put Simon at 2, which I believe is going to be the end game of this block. Simon lines up the blocks that way, takes 4, goes down to 2.
He needs to draw a creature. Any creature. Oh no! This is this is actually really good.
Another Grey Ogre, I think, is gonna seal the game.
Oh, it does! This Grey Ogre actually decides the match.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, to be fair, Michelle had a lot of live draws at that point with cards like Fire and Ice in his deck, dealing the last 2 points of damage. But it turns out that just a regular Grey Ogre was more than enough 2% lethal next turn. This was one of the strangest matches I have seen when it comes to Legacy or just Eternal formats in general in a very, very long time. 4/4 creatures attacking, Fiend Artisan eventually outgrowing the Rhinos, blocking profitably, but then a couple of Grey Ogres were able to finish the game. So congratulations to Michelle, making it into the finals, where Julian, I believe, is already waiting with his Temur Delver deck. So we're going to take a little bit of a break here before we need a break here. We need a caster break here right now to make sure we understand what really happened there. We're gonna take a little bit of a break here, and we're gonna be back with the finals in 5 or 10 minutes. So stay with us.